All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to give you all a minute to get connected as we're waiting for some attendees to join us. So we'll get started here in a minute. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for finding the time to join us for today's webinar. My name's Kristen. I'm the marketing coordinator here at SPARXiQ. And before we get started into the content, I do want to advise you to please use the chat feature. We're going to be doing a Q&A session at the end to answer any of your questions. Also, after the webinar, we'll be sending you the slide deck to refer to, as well as a link to download our white paper. So let's begin. Our topic today is how to improve your sales results with a sales training system. And I'll hand you off to our speakers, Mike Kunkle from SPARXiQ and Jake Miller of Allego.
Hey, thanks, Kristen, and hello, everybody. Jake, how are you this afternoon?
I'm well, Mike. How are you?
Doing great, thanks, man. So we have a fun topic today, right? This could possibly have been the longest webinar title in history. How to improve your sales results with a sales training system supported by Sales Readiness Technology with real-world examples and cases, right? And that's what we've teamed up with Jake and Allego as our partner to do. So let's move forward. We actually have a plan for today. So if you know Jake and I, this may surprise you, right? But here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to start with the challenges, why sales training fails so frequently, and talk a little bit about the challenge that's inherent in the profile of the modern learner. We'll talk about some solutions, fortunately, right? The sales training system that we've been advertising and having the right sales readiness technology and using it wisely to support that system. And of course, as we always do, we will end with any questions that you might have. If you have them, you can type those right into chat and we will plan to answer most of them at the end. But here's what we always do too. Kristen will keep an eye out while Jake and I are chatting. If something pops up that just begs to be answered in the moment, Kristen's going to say, hey, Mike, like the Geico camel, or Jake, interrupt us, answer that question, then we'll move on. But we'll plan to do the bulk of them somewhere near the end. So that's our plan for today. Let's just rock and roll and get started. As promised, challenge number one, why sales training fails. Let's take a look at this. All right, we're not going to talk about this piece of it today, but one of the things that we would just be remiss if we didn't address is poor hiring practices or selection practices are a major reason that sales training does fail. Because if you put the wrong person in the role, it doesn't matter how much training you do, right? If there isn't a fit, right? Training can only do so much. Worse sometimes is training fails because it's not the right solution. It's not the answer to the performance problem that's in question at the time, right? So in other words, if the problem isn't people not knowing what to do, why to do it, or how to do something, and maybe how well, training's not going to help them get any better, right? And so along with that, sometimes it's the right solution, but it's the wrong content. This is something we'll touch on later, right? When Jake talks about how do you get best practice content from people that you know will work in the real world, right? So even if training's the right solution, if you're teaching the wrong stuff, they won't get results. Doesn't matter how good of a system you've got in place. Sometimes there's a problem with the learning design or the learning experience is so poor, and this will make sense as we start to get into the profile of the modern learner. Sometimes there's no knowledge sustainment plan. We all know that, as soon as you learn something, right, for the first time, it all, stuff starts to fall out your other ear, right? So if there isn't a knowledge sustainment plan, that's a problem. Sometimes there's too little skill development. Selling, while there is a foundation of having the right mindset and maybe the sales DNA, and obviously there's stuff you have to know, like your products and your customer base, but at the end of the day, selling is a skill, right? So if you don't have skill development, feedback loops, and give people a chance to practice and get better, that's going to hurt your effectiveness of your training. And how about this, right? What if you taught the right stuff in the right way and gave people a chance to remember it and practice it, but then you just said, okay, good luck, go do that on your own? How often does training actually get out of the learning environment and used in the real world? This tends to be a big gap, and so lack of a purposeful transfer plan is a problem. Then how about coaching, right? We all know the impact that coaching can have, but yet, I mean, Jake, we did a study together last year, right, that showed the big gaps between how reps felt they were being coached and how managers felt that they were coaching them, right? So,
Right.
sometimes there's a big gap there and there's no coaching to mastery. And then sometimes there's no measurement plan, right? We all know that what gets measured gets done, but sometimes there's no plan to actually measure it. And then performance management. We're going to talk about this in the next slide, but if you're not managing people to expectations on to use what was taught, that's a big gap that causes problems. And then the last one, and Jake, you know this, this always makes people groan when I say it out loud, right? But sales enablement, sales training, it's really change management. And if you don't have some type of an aligned change management plan internally, sales training just isn't going to produce as good a result as it could, right? So these are the common reasons that we see why sales training fails. Now, I wanted to add this piece to it, though, because I follow the work that ATD, the Association for Talent Development, does quite a bit. And I'm really pleased with the fact that they have a sales enablement conference now. They have a sales enablement resource center, right? And they do this study every other year or so on the state of the sales training industry. And they asked this question: what is the top barrier to delivering effective sales training? This is the one that keeps coming as the single highest and biggest barrier. Salespeople are not held accountable for applying skills learned in training. And 59% of the respondents to the survey this last year in 2019 said this was true. And that number was sadly 50% in 2016, the previous time that they did it. So we're getting worse at this, right? This is a huge problem. So what's the bottom line of this? Look, it makes no sense to do the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result. In fact, our good buddy here, Einstein, would say that's probably the definition of insanity. So this is challenge number one. Jake, why don't you talk us through challenge number two here, the profile of the modern learner and what they're up against and how we have to adapt.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. This is critical because it's really has changed with how our our whole world has changed over the last, 3 to 5, 10 years. Basically, we are moving into an era where the world around us is changing at a rapid clip. The kind of the characteristic or the thing that's going to help organizations succeed in this new world where it's just the ground truth is kind of constantly shifting and evolving under our salespeople's feet. Salespeople will be encountering new competitors more often. Buyers are so much more sophisticated and knowledgeable. And it's just creating an environment where the only constant is change. And our learners, who are the ones who are on our employees, are the ones on the front lines having to constantly be the ones to adapt to that change. And so, and that those same forces that are driving this this evolving kind of ground truth that our employees are encountering, it's the same stuff that's driving what is this modern learner. It's, they're overwhelmed, they're distracted. You've got so many devices constantly getting pinged, constantly, new information coming your way for you to decide whether, hey, is this something I should respond to, or something I can let go. So it's just an environment where, as well, actually, where learners are learning things, are changing how they're interacting with information and technology outside of the workplace as well, and sort of redefining how we're gaining the knowledge and information that we need just to get around in our day-to-day lives. So what this is doing, is we're seeing we're seeing several kind of common themes. One is employees are now untethered. They're not at their desks. They're not. They're just much more mobile, and they're able to complete much more of their work on the go. And so that actually is creating sort of more of an expectation that they're going to be working more. And so we're seeing people working more and more and more and having less time for things like, of course, employee development. That's one of the things that ends up taking a natural back seat when we're overworked and overly distracted. Another piece is that, learners are wanting to learn on demand. And this comes back to what I was saying with, how our employees are interacting with technology outside of the workplace. It's that, if I need to get around, if I need to find the best restaurant to go and I'm new in town, I'm going to open up my mobile app. I'm going to pull open TripAdvisor and learn from my peers. If I need to, learn how to fix a leaky faucet and I don't know how to do so, I can pull open YouTube, type in the model number, and learn from a peer. So it's, you're doing this stuff outside of work, and then that same expectation is happening inside of work, that we're going to give them access to what they need on an on-demand basis. Another piece is that it's so much more collaborative. In an environment where the ground truth is constantly evolving, constantly shifting under your feet, you're relying on your peers, you're relying on your direct managers, you're relying on people who are on the ground with you to be able to learn. And this is driving a massive increase in the amount of kind of more collaborative learning that's going on. And then, of course, again, coming back to the paradigm outside of work, employees outside of work have now become accustomed to sharing knowledge, sharing their experiences through social media, through posting, through messaging apps. So now it's more of an environment where people have kind of developed the behavior pattern outside of work. How can we leverage that inside of work? And then finally, empowered. This gets at my original point, the kind of the big macro change that we're seeing, where institutions are having to change how they compete. It's no longer a model where the company who can scale their efficiencies is going to be the one to win the day. It's now we're in a situation where it's an organization's ability to learn and capture learning and support the employees who are on the front lines every day, encountering new and unforeseen situations all the time. So when we've got our employees encountering new situations, having to, learn new skills, and these are new and unforeseen, how are we going to train them on that? You can't train someone for that. You can't plan for that. You have to support them sort of more in the flow of their daily work. And so it's just some interesting trends that are really contributing to this big challenge that we're seeing. And just to give you kind of a story, I want to talk about an organization that we worked with, Aptio. They do IT business management software, and they were making a really kind of big shift in how they sell. They started, they've got a mostly remote workforce, first of all, so that really that sort of accelerates all of these trends that I was just talking about with the modern learner. When you're the more remote that your workforce is, it's all of these things kind of times two, right? And so this is what they were up against, and they were changing how they sell. They were moving from more of kind of a platform suite to more individualized SaaS products. And so, of course, retraining an entire workforce on that is a huge challenge. I mean, you've got the not only the buyers becoming more sophisticated, and just the sales process is becoming more difficult in general, but now you've also got this big change in how you're selling. You've got a lot of veterans who have gotten used to doing things the old way, and they're the ones who are that you're relying on to continue producing for you. And then compound all of this with a really a pretty distributed, sort of more remote workforce was tough. And our Sean Goldie, who is head of enablement over there, he came into the company, and they had to kind of retrain everybody and sort of revamp how they even thought about training. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to what happened in this story as we continue, but I kind of want to just leave you with that, and I will come back with the punchline, so to speak. But the bottom line here is, adjusting your approach. You've got to adjust your approach to be able to get results with modern learners, because using the old way and using sort of the old paradigm and older thinking, the reality on the ground has just changed too much for that to even be effective at this point. So yeah, kick it over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Jake. You know what I find fascinating about this, right, is in the sales profession, right, the people, that we're serving to help them sell more effectively to their customers, we say that you need to shift to be buyer-centric and shift the way that you sell. What we're really saying here is that we need to drink our own champagne or eat our own dog food, whatever phrase you prefer, right? And do the same thing to be able to adapt to our market or our customers, the people that we're serving, because things are changing. And if we don't adapt, we're going to definitely be left behind. So
Exactly.
if only there were solutions to these two big challenges, right? And thankfully there are, right? And I believe they are the sales training system that we're going to share with you today, and then supported with the right sales readiness technology. Let's dive into this, right? Let's talk first about the power of the sales training system. I have a lot of fun with this, right? Because I love to draw little diagrams like this. So let's talk through what this funny looking thing actually is, right? It starts really with preparing for change, right? Because if we believe what I said earlier, that sales training and actually having an impact on sales performance is really a change project, you want to ensure that the content that you've got will get results in the real world. If you miss on that, it doesn't matter what else you do around this diagram. Now, there are a bunch of different ways to do that, right? You can do top producer analysis. You can use content that's been proven effective in your space. You can get it from your top producers and collect it and curate it. And Jake's going to talk more about that, right? But you've got to have that content piece that will work. And then you've got to design a great learning experience, understanding how people learn, getting them the information in the right way, and then having the things you're going to see in this next phase of this to reinforce it and help them transfer it. But having a great learning experience is a big deal. And it puzzles me, as long as I've been in this profession, sort of a blend of the sales world and the learning world, that sometimes people think that, oh, if I know something, I'm going to be great at teaching it, or a great designer for this course. And I think the skill of real instructional design somehow gets underrated. So if you want to design a great learning experience, all right, you can orchestrate it in a variety of different ways, right? If it's formal training, you definitely want to have a great instructional designer. If it's informal or social, it's going to be the stuff that Jake's going to talk about in a little bit. But either way, you want to be thoughtful about this. And then you've got to get your managers engaged, right? You need to be able to engage, to enable your frontline sales managers and empower them to support the learning journey. And there are things that they need to do along the way, but we want to be careful not to put it all on their shoulders, because we just know that's not going to work or get done, right? But they need to see and understand the content. They need to know what it is so that they can reinforce it. They need to know how they can reinforce it with the things we'll talk about later. So there are things you can do to kickstart this and prepare for the change. Then it's a matter of being able to guide this change. And this is something that we call the 5 stages of sales mastery and behavior change. And by the way, that link at the bottom is where you can download the white paper that Jake and I wrote together on this. And you'll get the slides. You'll be able to click on that, download it. We've got a reminder at the end as well, and an email will come out about it. So grab that. It's free. It's chock full of deeper information that we can share today in an hour. But you want to guide people through these stages, right? Where you teach the content, you sustain the knowledge, you give them a chance to do skill development, help them transfer it to the real world, and then help them get to mastery, right? And there's a lot of detail in this slide behind these 5 stages, but I'm going to focus on the top and the bottom rows here, right? Walk with me through the stages and focus on the why. You can get into the what in different ways of how when you get the slides and you take a look through them. But in knowledge acquisition, right, the whole idea here is to help people learn something new. It's got to be known to work, as we've talked about, and you're teaching them what to do, why to do it, and how to do something. In sustainment, it's all about not forgetting. We know there's an Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Allego has got a great white paper on that you can check out, right? But just because somebody learns something doesn't mean they're going to retain that or remember it. So what's your purposeful strategy to do that? And then it's skill development. It blows my mind that in the sales profession that we actually resist role playing, right? Because we feel it's fake. The brain doesn't know the difference if you do it well. And there are a lot of ways to improve on that. You can give people virtual practice. You can have flipped classrooms. You can use virtual coaching tools like Allego offers, right? But you've got to give people a chance to practice, because just because they learned something and remembered it doesn't mean that they can actually do it. And then even if they learn it, remember it, and can do it, doesn't mean that they will. So how are you going to support them to actually apply these skills in the real world, right? And I think of the skill will matrix here, right? It's the difference between what's their skill level and what's their will to do something new and different. And how can you support that? Maybe with job aids, or being able to find the content very quickly to review it when they need it, right? You have to do something purposeful to help them transfer this to the real world. And then the last stage is skill mastery. Just because somebody learned it, remembered it, practiced it, and tried it, doesn't mean that they did it well or that they'll continue to do it. So how can their manager or sales enablement team or systems that you can employ help them get better at it over time and reach the level of mastery they need to succeed in the tough world of B2B enterprise sales, right, with all of these changing buyers that we keep talking about, right? So those are the 5 stages of sales mastery and behavior change. And then lastly, right, you've prepared for the change, you've guided people through it. You certainly want it to stick, right? So this is where we get to the cement to the change piece. You want to get measures and metrics in place about how is the learning going, how is sales performance going, how are people doing the things that you've taught on the job, right? And what are the metrics and lead and lag indicators for all of that? Get those in place, because what gets measured gets done. And you want the data to know whether it's going great and you're going to have a phenomenal ROI, or whether there's something you need to do to pivot to be able to get the results that you want. Then it's about managing to behavior and performance expectations, right? Because if you remember back to that ATD survey I mentioned, right, 59% of the survey participants say that it's the fact that the reps are not held accountable for using what they were taught that is one of the largest challenges in sales training today. So if you teach content that you know will get results, wouldn't it be crazy to not hold people accountable to actually using those? And that's where you can bring in managing to behavioral and performance expectations. Whatever your organization does for performance management, it's part of this process. Now look, other than accounting, where if you do something wrong, it could be, create significant problems in the organization. I don't know of another group of people in a company who have performance expectations as severe as a sales force. If you think about it, these people are like the Olympic athletes of the corporate world, or maybe sort of like the astronauts of business, right, with the right stuff. So, being able to support them in a way to help drive this change, to help, use these behaviors that will work. It's helping them, it's helping your customers if you're implementing great content, and it helps the organization. And then managing this whole thing as a change project and staying with it, right? You think of change project as stretching a tight rubber band, right? If you just stretch it once and let it go, it's going to snap back and hurt your hand, right? But if you stretch it long enough, right, it stays eventually in place. And that's the idea, that you want to stick with these projects and the reinforcement and the coaching and the support systems that you put in place, right? Collecting feedback from people and sharing best practices until the thing that you're teaching becomes the way we do things around here. And when you get to that point, you've achieved success. So there it is in its entirety without any highlights or faded text. So in case you want to print this when you get it and paper your office with it, you now have the opportunity. So the bottom line here, folks, is that taking a logical systems approach with a focus on behavior change is going to give you the best chance possible of meeting your training goals and delivering the ROI that you're looking for. So Jake, now you've got a way, right, where sales readiness technology can support both these challenges, right? The modern learners that we've talked about, and this solution, this sales training system, which is a solution to why sales training fails. Why don't you chat with these nice folks about how this can all get supported with the right sales readiness technology?
Excellent. Yeah, I would love to. So going into kind of the 5 stages, and across each of these, when Mike and I first started kind of talking and working together, and we started kind of saying, okay, like each one of these stages, it has to have technology support. And there's just certain solutions that you want to talk about and think about when you're, anytime you're implementing a sales readiness transformation, and a new approach, and as well bringing in any new technology to support that. So the first thing when you're talking about, well, actually, let me just take a step back here. The content piece is absolutely critical, and like what Mike said, you want to have you want to have a system that's going to allow you to start to kind of source content from the field. And when I say from the field, that can be any kind of content. It can be PDFs, or written content, or ideas, text collaboration. But the most kind of effective way that we found to do this is through video. If you can find a way, if you have a system that allows you to be able to capture, or allows you to be able to empower your employees in the field, your salespeople out in the field, your subject matter experts, even your managers who are supporting them, start to empower them to be able to actually start to create their own content. Maybe it's to share knowledge amongst themselves. Maybe you empower salespeople to be able to capture a video walking out of a call, recapping that call. Here's a couple key points. Here's what I said. Here's how it worked. Here's how it was received. And just wanted to kind of give everybody that recap, right? Just a quick kind of 2-3 minute video recap where you've captured, or you've allowed that salesperson to kind of capture their knowledge, share it with their team. And that now someone else can encounter that piece of knowledge. But what you're able to do is you can start to pull that content in centrally. So you can now start to kind of cherry pick the content that's getting created naturally out in the field through just knowledge sharing, and start to pull those videos in. And now and start to add assessments to them, add quiz questions, start to turn them into learning modules. So it's an important way, any system you're evaluating, to be able to kind of pull in that voice of the field. Really drives up engagement, and really is a really effective way to train employees. So you start with your content. And then your stage one, knowledge acquisition. You've built up your content library. You've got a mix of different things. You've got your regular e-learning modules and maybe some peer best practice videos, and then you're going to deploy those. And this is, of course, this is about knowledge acquisitions. And we've got here learning experience platforms, but it could be an LMS, it could be instructor-led training, right? There's that's supported with technology, right? Any kind of the paradigm where you are putting learners through a program in a course, and various learning paths. This is the kind of stuff that you want to look at. And as far as making that content the kind of content that is more sort of on demand, is going to be even better. So if you can have, if you can put people through sort of more learning paths and sort of knowledge acquisition content that is also able to be repurposed as, hey, here's training content that's available to you as you move through your journey, you can come back to it. That's going to be even better. So any solution that you're looking at, you want to make sure that it has a mix of being able to support that instructor-led and virtual instructor-led. You want to make sure that it's got the ability to put people through learning paths, but you want to make sure that it's also got that component of that on-demand content, maybe short videos or other kind of engaging things that people can go and access on their own. As you move into the second stage, knowledge sustainment, you're looking at learning reinforcement systems. There's a lot of different ways of approaching this. Systems technology available, as far as you can start to program a series of quiz questions or just kind of knowledge checks to be sent out to employees on a weekly basis or a daily basis for maybe 10 to 30 seconds a day, just to answer a few questions around whatever topic area that you've just put them through in stage one in knowledge acquisition. So say we're talking about a product launch that you're putting everyone through this system to train on. You've got in your first stage, you've gotten through all your product launch training and your learning paths and whatnot. You move into the second stage, and now you're able to set a programmatic series of questions to hit all those learners with on a day-to-day basis to start to reinforce that knowledge. Because Mike mentioned with the forgetting curve, it's critical that you're giving your learners an opportunity, multiple opportunities over time, to sort of start answering questions around the topics that they just learned. It's not enough to, at the end of the knowledge acquisition phase, to just put a quiz at the end or an assessment at the end of that and just call it a day. You've got to have a way to continue that for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after that stage one, to start to drive home that knowledge. And that's where learning reinforcement systems come into play. A lot of different tools out there that can support this kind of a thing. And a lot of times called micro-learning systems and things of that nature. Also, another piece that's important for learning reinforcement is kind of practice simulations. There's technology available. I mean, we use it in Allego, in our platform, to put salespeople through simulations and virtual simulations. So, you might have a salesperson record a video of themselves, answering questions, and the software can actually pepper that salesperson with questions on a randomized questions that you can set beforehand. Maybe it's common objections or common customer questions or competitive questions that you learned from top producers, right? Of course, top producer analysis is kind of the key to this whole thing, understanding what works already and what people are encountering. But you can set up simulations like that, and then have salespeople going through those on an automated basis through a system, and then send that, and then have that sent in to be graded or scored by their manager or by yourselves or people on your team. You move into stage 3, and this is where you're really getting into that practice. This is the last piece that I talked about with sort of the practice simulations. It sort of bleeds into this piece where you're practicing skill development, because now you're getting into the giving salespeople the opportunity to sort of simulate using that new knowledge. So because they've acquired the new knowledge in stage 1, they've reinforced it, but now in stage 2, but now in stage 3, it's about, okay, how can I start to use this and start to make this my own and get some practice sort of applying this and seeing how it feels to deliver this messaging, and getting an opportunity with a coach or a manager to get them to ask me some tough questions around this particular thing that I'm talking about. This stage is giving salespeople the chance to start to build that muscle memory that they're eventually going to turn and take out with them into the field. And of course, with you've got the ability to do video role play with a lot of systems today, where you can have where you or a manager can create a 2-minute video outlining, hey, here's everybody on the team, I want you to record how you're going to handle this particular talk track or this this messaging, and please send it back to me. I want to be able to give you some feedback. Salespeople can all create their videos on their own time. They get the chance to practice, not just practice in the mirror, but actually practice from start to finish, from the beginning of what they're going to say through the end. And that's what video practice really does, is it kind of puts salespeople in a position where they've got to really practice it. They've got to go from beginning to end. And what we find is that salespeople are doing 4 to 5 practice takes on any given one of these exercises. So that's 4 to 5 times that they would have been practicing on a real customer, right? So this is just a really powerful way to drive that skill development using technology. And then you get into stage 4, skill transfer. They're getting out into the field. They're applying this. You've got job aids. You've got the ability to, with technology solutions now, serving up the right information, the right knowledge assets, right at the point of need, right in the flow of a salesperson's work. It might be, if I'm a rep and I open up my CRM and I go to my opportunity to mark something, and I am able to see videos. Maybe it's a couple videos by some peers, maybe by a top salesperson in my my company who I recognize them and I know they're a top salesperson, and it's a 3-minute video of them talking through specifically how they handle a situation just like the one that I'm encountering, that I'm in the CRM. Because right, you can use the CRM data to program that, so you can, based on the deal that they're in, based on the product they're selling, or the competitors that they're against, or the industry, all these things, this data that they're marking in the CRM, you can start to serve up learning content to them on demand based off of that data. You've also got manager toolkits, workflow support. All of these things that you can be used digitally. You can, making available the right content, the right not just knowledge assets, but the right sales collateral, and have that be attached to a video or a piece of content that's teaching them how to use that piece of sales collateral. So instead of just dumping a tool on them, like a piece of collateral, now it's accompanied with some instruction on how to use it, some direction, some guidance. And that can be, you can serve these up in like a recommendation feed style, like a social feed. When they log into their learning platform, they're able to see it right there. And then oh, okay. And based on the deal that they're in, right? And so this is ways to start to get really, really advanced with being able to prescribe the right things to salespeople and support them in their flow of work. And then finally, with skill mastery, you've got the ability to start to look at the game tape with conversation intelligence functionality. You can start to pull in sales calls into a coaching platform and be able to start to analyze what what are they saying? Who is speaking more? Is the rep speaking more than the prospect is, right? We never want to see that. Who, did they discuss price too soon? Did they, did they immediately, did they get to get, or did they give to get, right? Did when they were asked a question, did they ask for something in return, right? So we can start to actually analyze what's going on in our sales conversations, and then be able to apply some of the stuff with virtual coaching tools that I was talking about in the skill development stage 3. You can start to coach directly to that. So you can start to, right point in time on a given sales call, have a manager and a rep going back and forth doing coaching on this particular moment, bringing in peers, allowing others to start to coach that rep. So there's a lot of ways that you can use technology to support all of these stages, and to really start to kind of make it a little more scalable and sort of bring it to life a bit. And then Mike, I'll actually kick it back over to you. I think you've got an example here of how kind of diving in on one of these.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. And one of the things that folks that Jake is far too classy to say, right? When you go back and you look at those 5 stages, I've seen companies try to implement this by sewing together 5, 6 different sales enablement applications, and then later joke, about how they put a Frankenstack together, right? But one of the things that Allego will allow you to do is they can touch on each one of these stages. And I know, Jake, that you wouldn't ever product pitch at people, but I think it is fair to say that the reason that we've partnered with Allego at SPARXiQ is that they support something in each one of these stages. And that is what I want to share with you, right? Is that with our courses, right? And we still do ILT as people want it, but we tend to build online video-based, entertaining, binge-worthy type of courses that teach not only didactic, right, by sharing content, but teach through stories and watching scenarios. So when we publish that, we still realize that there's still an Ebbinghaus problem. There's still a cognitive load problem. And if we want people to take even these, shorter 15-minute modules and do something with it, there needs to be a plan to go through these 5 stages. So I wanted to share with you how we've actually used Allego to do things both in the system, as you see as dark blue, and outside the system as the lighter blue, to support learners in going through the process and getting the results that they want. So it starts with great content, but we also do embedded quizzes right in the e-learning. So rather than just waiting for the spaced reinforcement or retrieval learning later, right, we do some programmatic learning, as they used to call it, or just embedded quizzes right in the course itself. Now, the next step goes in a couple of different directions, and these can be concurrent, happening at the same time. They can be spaced. So maybe the spaced repetition happens first and then practice and feedback, but there isn't any reason that both of those things can't happen at the same time. You can start spaced repetition or retrieval learning. Retrieval learning is just bringing it back out of your memory, right? So Jake talked about how you could set up to have questions sent to the mobile device to answer them, just a couple of seconds to do that per day, but it reinforces what was taught in the course. It also captures, did they answer the question correctly or incorrectly? How many times? How long did it take them to remember and get it right? And it produces reports where you can look at that and say who needs help with what. And then managers can support them and coach them, or the sales enablement team can assist with supporting and coaching, right, based on data. Right, and I joke sometimes that in the next 5 years we're all going to be data scientists, right? But we want to be more data driven where we can and spend time in places where we're going to get the greatest return for our efforts, especially with salespeople, where it's so critical, right, to help them with things they really need help with and not bog them down with other things that they don't. So spaced repetition retrieval learning is part of our curriculum process, as is practice and feedback and coaching. So in the second box there, right, you see that this happens both in the system and outside the system. One of the things that I really like is doing it in the system. and then giving the managers an opportunity to grade, provide feedback, possibly have peers do it, select best practices, put them in a best practice library. It feeds back into the content piece we talked about earlier, right? And that's great, but feedback isn't necessarily coaching per se. So practice and feedback can happen right in the app, and then outside the system, managers might view this, and rather than putting some notes in the system itself, they might pick up the phone and have a voice-to-voice conversation, or at their next meeting on next Tuesday, they might sit down and maybe even review that together online and have a coaching session based on it. So it can happen both in the system and outside the system. And if you tee it up that way, right, both are possible. At a minimum, people are having a chance to practice and get feedback. That can happen while the spaced repetition is happening over a period of time. Now, down there on the bottom, outside the system, although I probably could have, Jake, right, put in a little piece of blue here, right, because the manager toolkits can be housed in the system, downloaded by managers, or just look at the materials to prepare for a session. But manager toolkits are basically a way to document how managers can support the training that's happening. It might be a mini meeting. It might be job aids that they can help their reps prepare for and use as they're getting ready for real sales calls. So imagine that you've taught a session based on discovery, doing discovery well. You've got a job aid that can be downloaded and used for that. And then the manager runs a session with his or her team on reminding them about what they learned in that session, having them use the job aid to prepare for real customer interactions, get ready for those, coach them on how that's going to happen, maybe do some role play, right, and really tee them up for success as they're transferring what they learned into the real world environment, and helping them be as successful as possible with their first forays out using the new skills, rather than kicking them in the seat of the pants and saying, go get them, Tiger, right? Which is what happens far too often. Right. And so then again, I've already said this, right? But the job aid piece, right? After they've done some spaced repetition, they're getting some practice, they can download those job aids. Manager coaching continues over time. And what this leads to, right through the 5 stages, is multiple interactions with the managers and eventually getting to sales mastery and a higher level of performance than they were at the far left when they started. Right? Because we've set up a system supported by Sales Readiness Technology that will help them get to better results. And then after that, as they're out getting those results and they're figuring things out and they're having great experiences, or they run in maybe to a particular problem, right, and they want feedback from other people, now you're capturing best practices. You're doing the social sharing element that's important for the modern learners, which all feeds right back around into continually improving your content and having your sales force support each other. So that's how we used Allego to build reinforcement for our SPARXiQ courses. And I've got to say that it's a system that I'm really proud of and that our clients are benefiting from. So that's how to take what Jake was talking about in one way, one example of how it's done. But Jake, even better, right? You've got a story that you started, and we have a fun ending to that, right?
Yes, we do. Yeah, thanks, Mike. That was a great explanation. I appreciate the you bringing up the point about how if ideally all of the different you can stitch together a different solution for each of the stages, and there certainly are vendors who specialize in kind of each one of those 5 things, but a single point of entry for salespeople is absolutely critical, not just for their experience, of course, that's the number one, but also, I mean, for having a single, for data. I mean, being able to start to take the data that is being created from interacting at these different points throughout the 5 stages is critical for understanding what to do in the next stage, and how to support them in that next stage. So yeah, definitely a single platform is the way to go if that's available to you. And there certainly are platforms available like Allego and others. So to finish up the story with over at Aptio, Sean Goldie, what he was facing with, some headwinds around remote sales force and having to kind of retrain everybody because they're switching how their whole selling model. He ended up using Allego and sort of applied all of the different things that we just talked about across the 5 stages. So he sourced a lot of great content from the field and built learning paths to put everyone through them. And it wasn't, but it wasn't just content from the field. It was also, they were housing he had SCORM modules that they had been using. They pulled those into the platform and they built some learning paths with those, and then interspersed some real kind of powerful field generated content of salespeople actually describing how, right from the horse's mouth, hearing how top people do this stuff and hearing them talk about it, and then interspersed with different video exercises and different types of assessments. So they went and built their whole their kind of their stage 1 knowledge acquisition in the platform. Then what they went and did is applied this is a good story because they kind of they went from end to end. They went and deployed the flash drills. We've got this Allego's got this thing, and Mike alluded to it, and it's what I was talking about in the knowledge sustainment phase or stage, where they were sent. They programmed quizzing to go out to sales reps to go out to the whole team for just about 30 seconds a day, and they had it set on a programmatic basis to go over 3 weeks. And what they were able to do is that the system starts to detect how people are answering different questions. So how well are different sales reps doing on various subjects? And then what the system does is it starts to kind of back off on the topics and the questions that are associated with topics that salespeople are doing really well with and really understanding, and starting to hit them harder in areas where they're not doing as well. So it's you're maximizing their time. And it's sort of like having like a personal trainer type of thing. And so they rolled that out. They engaged with practice and coaching. Right prior to this, their VP of sales had been really getting on the phone and calling people and doing sort of over the phone role plays with all the sales reps. And that was, of course, just not a scalable way to attack the problem. And so they started to implement video coaching. And so as salespeople were moving out into the field, okay, let's do some role plays on this. And actually before they even got out into the field, they had done a whole certification where they made sure everybody was on point with the messaging and with the various products, and that they could speak to the competition. And again, all of this stuff happening virtually, or a lot of it happening virtually. Not in the past, it would have had to be, hey, let's fly everybody in for these multiple rounds of training, and then some certification round, and then doing coaching, and we'd have to be flying out to them to coach. He was able to do so much of this asynchronously and so much of this virtually. And so, having sales reps go through those simulations at the end to make sure they understood how to talk about the individual products versus the platform suite, because it's a whole different way of selling. And then being able to make sure that salespeople who struggle are able to get the remediation, be able to allow, and that's where they bring in the coaching piece. And so they started to empower their managers to be able to start to go back and forth and coach with salespeople, and connecting what goes on in training to what ends up happening out in the field. The best way to do that is to enable your managers. Manager enablement, this is something that Mike talks about a lot, is absolutely critical. It allows you to have that reach once salespeople get out into the field, because managers are the ones who are sort of the stewards of the employees' learning and development as they're out in the field, right? And so having a really smooth handoff there. So what Sean over at Apptio did is he was able to provide managers with a better view of what went on during training, because so much of it was, you're able to have dashboards and different competency dashboards and things to be able to give the managers better information to target their coaching based on how people did in training, and as well based on how people are doing out in the field. And so they were doing the same thing, pulling sales calls into the system and starting to coach to the calls, starting to see the patterns where people are tripping up. And then this actually allowed them to start to revamp some of the messaging, because now you've got a feedback loop straight back into marketing, because and now Sean was able to turn around and say, hey, look, at this message isn't resonating as well as we thought it would here and here. So and some of the things that some of the people in the field are encountering and some of the things that they're using are working really well. And here's an example, right? And he's able to pull up a video, a field generated video that a sales rep made talking about, hey, I was talking to the this audience, and this message around why the value of the individualized products is greater here. It resonated much better when I delivered it this way, and so you're able to get that feedback loop and back into product, back into marketing, to be able to understand how can we leverage all of the learning that employees our salespeople are encountering every day. How can we start to capture that? Because one of the other big points that we talked about is that organizations are encountering new and unforeseen situations all the time. So having that feedback loop from the field where you start to capture not only best practices, but capture the things that salespeople are learning is critical. And so Apptio, they were able to shorten their sales cycle, increase their average deal size, and reduce their ramp time at coming out of onboarding by having this end-to-end approach that sort of supports the rep throughout their whole life cycle at the company. Really a much more sort of rep-centric approach to enablement. So it's a cool story.
Wow. Yeah, I got to tell you, Jake, that we talk so much, right, about the kind of problems that we're facing either in the learning space or in the sales space. And it's really encouraging when you hear a story like that from somebody who approached it right and got results, right? So I really love that story. So what's the bottom line here?
So the bottom line here is, yes, that Sales Readiness Technology will support everything that you want to achieve as long as you're doing the right things, as long as you're using it the right way. There's a million wrong ways to do it. There's a million ways to take shortcuts. But if you are focusing on the rep, maintaining that rep-centric mindset when you're building out your programs and when you're making decisions about technology that you're going to purchase and use and building your tech stack, maintaining that rep-centric approach, it will be your North Star, and it will help you be able to achieve these kind of results. So yeah, got to use it wisely.
Einstein would be proud, man. So look, let's how do we summarize what we talked about here today quickly for you, right? Sales training fails a lot if you're not doing it the right way, right? So don't do the same thing over and over and hope for a different result, right? And with your modern learners, we know now that we need to adjust our approach to get better result, right? As preferences change. Systems thinking, right? Like the sales training system we talked about, right? That type of logical systems approach with a focus on behavior change has got the best chance of meeting your goals and delivering ROI. And sales readiness technology can absolutely deliver everything that you want to achieve if you use it wisely to meet the needs of the modern learners and support the training system that we talked about. So that's our advice for today, folks. Now, typically we ask for your takeaways. If you've got anything you want to jot down, this is just something private you share with us. We love to hear these sorts of things. You can do that right in the chat. But I want to give you a quick tour just through some things in the appendix and answer any questions. Here's some propaganda about me, but a way to connect with me in the bottom right? Places to connect and follow content. We've got the same in the deck for Jake, right? You can figure out where you connect with Jake and follow content that he and Allego publish, a little bit about SPARXiQ for you, our company, a little bit more about Allego that you can take a look at, right? Here's again that white paper we mentioned. It's about the sales training system specifically with the 5 stages of sales mastery and behavior change and more detail about the things that we talked today, written by Jake and I, right? And available at that link. So with that, Kristen, I know that we've gone through most of our time here today, but are there any burning questions that came up that you'd like us to answer?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we did receive a few questions here. And if anybody has any other questions, I know we're running out of time, but feel free to drop them in the chat. Our first question here is, in organizations with multiple generations, how do you balance the needs of modern learners with others?
So Jake, I'll say something quick to that, but I think you guys have got deeper expertise here. You know, I actually think as you hear about the needs of the generations, that there's a little bit less difference than we sometimes say. Not that the newer generations don't need different things, because I do believe the modern learners do, as we've talked about. But I think those same things that we're now picking up to do for the modern learners, I think they work and they've been wanted by boomers like me for years, and we just didn't get them. Jake, what do you think, or what would you add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say that to echo that point. We don't really see, this is a question that we get a lot. Well, do you struggle? You've got a mobile platform and it's, video based, and is this something that's going to really more appeal to the millennials in our among our salespeople much more so than we actually don't see that. It we're seeing a pretty even distribution of usage of our platform among all different age groups, because let's face it, I mean, we're at a point now where everyone is on mobile, everyone is on Facebook and on different social media apps. I mean, that's across all ages. People are accessing content outside of work and sharing their experiences on social media. I mean, this is not relegated to just the millennial generation. So yeah, I mean, we're really seeing that this shift is kind of happening across all people. And frankly, the reason why is what you mentioned, Mike, is because these are just sort of just an overall kind of a better way to do it now. It's an easier way. It's more empowering for learners. And so that's, empowerment does not, knows no bound in age, that's for sure. So, I mean, we're seeing, we're really seeing a pretty even distribution among age groups of usage.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And thanks, by the way, for not saying, hey, boomer.
No problem. And thanks for not saying, hey, millennial.
All right. Do we have time for another one, Kristen?
If you have time, I have time. We've got one more question here.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, do you need to use the full sales training system for every training initiative?
I'll start with that one, Jake. I would say absolutely not. You'll kill yourself, right? I do think that you want to think through, like Jake mentioned earlier, right? For a product launch, if it's a full big product launch, it's the first time you're going to market. Wow, I would want to spend some time getting them through the stages and make sure that they can truly take this product to market in the most effective way and serve buyers' needs. Now, if you're getting a product update, right, then there might be bits and pieces that you want to do, but you might not have to stage the entire thing the same way that you would. If you're rolling out a new sales methodology, you should be committed to an insane asylum if you don't do the entire full stages, right? So I think with most answers like that, I think it's somewhat contextual. I think you want to pick and choose. You never want to use a howitzer to swat a fly, or a fly swatter to, discipline an elephant, right? Because the elephant will just laugh at you. So I think you have to balance it. But I think there are elements of that, right? You don't want to just train somebody on something and walk away, but how many of the stages or how much time you invest, I think, is based on how significant the change, how important it is that people actually use what you're teaching, and how big of a behavioral change it might be. Jake, do you have something to add there, or maybe even a different take on it?
No, it's same. When I think about, this is a question we might get. Allego, you've got a real broad platform. There's lots of different things that we could be doing with this. You can be doing upfront baseline learning paths, and we could do reinforcement, and hey, we could do coaching, and we could also do this and that. And do we have to be doing all of it? The thing that we always say is the same thing that you're basically echoing exactly what you just said. Depending on the initiative that you've got, there's going to be sometimes when you're going to want to use the whole thing. You're going to want to have an end-to-end process that's supported through technology, and you're going to want to engage all the different functionality in the platform. But then, there's going to be plenty of times when you want to just be able to get information out to somebody. So maybe it's just that first stage where you just want to provide some quick knowledge on something, and then maybe you kind of skip to the last stage where you just make it available for them in like a resource library that they can come and access. Maybe it's not something they're going to be, maybe they're only going to be encountering this 10% of their time selling, and so you don't want to have to make them go through all these different steps with a certification and with role plays and all simulations and all that. So it is very much contextual, but that's why it is important to start from an end-to-end system like the sales training system, and then be able to use parts of it that you need based on your situation.
Context and nuance, right? It's always context and nuance. So,
yep.
Well, Jake, I want to thank you for being here with me. This was a blast for me, as it always is.
Likewise.
Thank SPARXiQ for setting it all up and running it. Kristen, thanks a bunch for being our host. Do you want to take it home?
Sure. Well, I just wanted to reiterate to keep an eye out for an email that's going to include today's slide deck and white paper download that they mentioned earlier, and say thank you again for participating, and we hope to see you all again at one of our upcoming webinars.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.